Hello again, everyone. So today I'm going to go to the comments section and answer a couple of questions about submixes. So Oracle Electronica, this was about 7 days ago, says this: thanks for the demo, good video. Now can you explain the point of a submix? What is the actual point, and what's the difference between, for example, submix and outputs 1 and 2? I'm really confused. I can understand the difference between a send and a submix. That's plain and different, but that's a plain difference. But what's the difference between a submix and an out, and how do you use a submix with your song? What advantage does a submix have over an output? Now the cool thing about this is Brandon Brand, he actually answered part of the question. I have some of the same questions, but I can answer one. The reason to use a submix is so you can save space on your song. And it's a lot more efficient to use a submix and to add effects individually to each track or sequence. And this is true. So thank you so much for that, Brendan. That's actually one of the more important points. So whenever you're using your MPC, there is an inherent CPU usage with every element that you introduce. So in order to prevent your projects from potentially crashing, what you want to do is you want to use your resources as efficiently as possible by way of submixes. But in conjunction with that, I figured what I do today is go over 3 practical applications of a submix, and I'll explain why you do this along the way as well. But before I jump into that, I just want to kind of, reiterate the definition of a submix. Plain simple, submix is a bus. And what I mean by that is that what you can do is you can route, say for example, if you have 8 tracks, and you want to apply the same insert to all 8 tracks. Well, you don't necessarily have to go through each track and apply that insert, whether it be a delay, a reverb, a chorus, some modulation effect, whatever. You don't have to do that with each of the individual 8 tracks. What you can do is you can route all 8 tracks to a single submix, apply the insert to the submix, and it'll affect the sound of the 8 tracks. But I'll show you more of that, but let's dive into some practical applications, and we'll take it from there. All right, let's get started. Okay, so practical application number 1. What I have in front of me is a simple 2-step drum sequence. Okay, all right. So at the moment, this is all part of one track, right? So if I go, that was my track mixer. So my channel mixer rather. So right now it's all part of one track. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to explode this track. So let me show you how I'm going to do that. And you guys are probably aware of this, but I'm going to walk through the process anyway. So I'm going to tap this pencil icon, and then I'll just tap explode track. And again, guys, I'm using the MPC 3 firmware or MPC 3 software. So if you guys, any of you guys who are still on the previous iteration of this, things might look slightly different. Personally, I like MPC 3. I've heard a lot of negative things about it, but truthfully, it's not that bad. Not for me anyway. All right, so now, okay, moving too quickly. All right, if I go back to the channel mixer, now all of my drums have their own tracks. So here we are. Now notice how the first track is muted. So by default, what winds up happening is track number 1 stays in place. And subsequently, what winds up happening is that all of the other pads, or all of the other pads get assigned their own track, in which case there should be only 8 of them. And then there's a mute group over here. Now let's do a little bit of investigating. So which track is which. So let's solo this out. It's a hat. Okay. So what I like to do is I'd like to go through these and just kind of give them an overt name. Hat 1. Cool. Or that sounds like a closed hat. So C hat. 1. Okay. All right. Another hat here. Kick drum. Okay, so now that all of my tracks have been renamed and organized, what I'm going to do is I'm going to route each drum track to submix number 1. And the way I do that is I tap the output slots here underneath the channel mixer and dial them back to submix number 1. And there we have it. And then from there, what I can do is go back to my main menu, cycle over to submix number 1. I've renamed submix number 1 drum bus, and I did that with purpose. It's just a prep technique. If you ever want to change the name of your submix, just double tap. So originally submix number 1, just like all the others, but you can just double tap it and change it to whatever it is you want. Just threw that in there. And there we are, drum bus. Okay, so now if you notice, the drum bus or submix number 1 is being routed to outputs 1 and 2. All right, so I have individual drum tracks routed to a submix that is routed to output number 2. And then from there, what I can do is I can tap effects. So I'm still on drum bus or submix number 1, tap effects, go to inserts and apply my bus compressor. Now, before I go into the demonstration of how I would use bus compression, the question is, why didn't I apply the bus compressor before? So the tracks were all merged. They were all one at some point before I exploded them into separate channels. So why didn't I just apply the bus compressor then? The reason being is because if I wanted to, I can go back to main, cycle back over to each of my individual drums, and if I wanted to, I could apply an, hold on, let me go back. If I wanted to, I could apply an insert to each individual drum track or each individual drum channel. That being said, just because I make a change here, well, let me put it this way: making a change here just ensures that the effect is routed to the submix. So making a change to an individual track, there we are. So by making a change to an individual track, I will still be able to hear the effects of that track on the submix. Previously, I wouldn't have been able to do that unless, of course, I use pad mixing. If I use pad mixing, that would have worked as well. So yeah, so again, it's kind of a it's kind of like a choose your own journey here. But this is my preferred method. But anyway, back to the bus compressor here. So now that everything is routed the way I need it, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to apply some bus compression. So how does this work? So we all know how compressors work, but I can also do a quick recap here. So we have our wet dry. How much of the compressed signal we'll hear. We have our attack, which basically tells us how long it takes. So the higher this, so the further to the right I push this dial, the longer it takes for the compressor to take effect. Release is the antithesis. it tells us how long it takes for the compressor to stop being effective. So if I dial this, if I pull this dial all the way to the right, it will it'll almost hold the compression effect indefinitely. Whereas if I dial it to the left, the compressor shuts off almost instantaneously. The gain reduction slaps back. Threshold, it basically tells me I can dial at what decibel level do I want the compressor to take effect. So let's see here. I'm going to dial these to noon. Ratio for every decibel of gain, how many do I want to leave? Now this one does not appear to have the overt 1 to 1, 1 to 2, 1 to 3 ratio. So I'm going to use my ears in this instance, but I'm assuming this is 1 to 1, this is 6 to 1, 9 to 1, so on and so on, 20 to 1. Old school, I believe, is a saturation effect, and it is a, oh geez. Okay, so that's all or nothing. It's either on or off. And then, of course, you have your overall output. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to start dial again. I want a full wet signal. Let's go. All right, let's get some output going here. So that's, let's see. I don't want too quick of an attack. I want the transients there. Give me a little bit of release. Well, actually, I want to snap back really fast. Here we go. Lower the threshold. That's all squashed. Okay. Give me a gentle ratio. Cool. All right, there we are. So let's do a quick comparison. I'll turn the effect off and on and go from there. All right, so bus compression off. Bus compression on. So bus compression stabilizes the dynamics all the while making a punchier mix. Comes in handy for situations like these. And so that's practical example number 1 for your submixes. On to number 2. Okay, for practical example number 2, I'm going to add a new track, and let's go with a plugin. All right, so it's a tube synth. Let's go at hype. All right. All right, let's choose a sound. Oops, hold on. I think I'm just going to use a preset for this one. All right, I think I found one I can use. All right, so let's see. And from there, I'll just go to my grid view. And so used to using keyboards, but whatever, you know. Cool. All right, and I'll edit the end. I'll just use one long sustained note. Cool. All right. Oh, let's duplicate the track. Okay. What I'm going to do, well, now the track has been duplicated. I wonder if it duplicated the grid as well. No, it didn't. It didn't. All right. So now I'm going to find a completely different sound. Okay. All right. We'll do the exact same thing with the grid. All right. And let's draw that in. Nudge back. All right. So now I have two tracks that play the same note, two different channels. Let's go over here. All right, so it's going to be plugin 1. So I'll just call it, so I'll just name these pads 1 and pad 2. Cool. All right. So let's go back to main. Let's take a, well, actually, we're going to go back to our channel mixer here. We're going to go to input, output, and we're going to route these to submix number 2. Okay, so the next practical application to using submixes is overall EQ. So I have these pads running simultaneously, and they're all being routed to the same submix. All right, so let's go back. So let's go to our main view here. Let's go to submix number 2, and we'll call this submix pad bus. All right, so those pads are occupying a lot of space, a lot of sonic real estate, so to speak. They're rather overt and rather big. So what we want to do is we want to trim them down a bit, make room for either a vocalist or a bass guitar, vocalist, bass drum, what have you. So let's see, what we can do is we can go to our effects here, and we can apply one of our EQ plugins, EQ/filters. Now, one thing I do, so let's do a low cut or a high pass filter really quickly. So let's see here. So we have our high pass filter. Okay, so let's just use a high pass filter for the time being. A high pass filter basically affords me the capability of cutting low frequencies, thus making room for, again, bass drums, bass guitars, and what have you. So let's get started. So here are all my lows, and I'll probably cut at the 500 range, you know, just to be sure. Add a little bit. And now I can. The cool thing about this high pass filter is I can add a little resonance for harmonic content. Not too much, just a little bit. Okay, effect on, effect off. Okay. Now let's bring the drum arrangement back into this, because right now the drum bus is muted. And remember, this is the bus with the bus compressor. And let's turn this off. So it kind of cleans it up a bit, right? All right, next up, I'm going to add another wave of EQ. And this is going to be my standard graphic / parametric EQ. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of some of the, I'm going to slightly attenuate the mid-range frequencies just to make room for, like I said, a vocalist, in this case, the claps and the snares and all of that good stuff. So let's see here. Maybe the yep, this will work. This will work. So let's see here. Okay, got it. So I'm just going to hone in on these mid-range frequencies. I'll probably zero in on 800 to 1500, just just for good measure. Decibel level slightly. Alright. Particularly the same thing with the highs, but not too much. So let's do a comparison. Off. On. All right, and there we are. So the second practical application revolves around general EQing. In the absence of a submix, I would have had to apply those EQ parameters and settings and inserts to each of my individual pads. So try to imagine if you had like, say 5 pads or 5 tracks that have similar frequency ranges, and you want to make attenuations and accentuations on in certain areas. Well, here you are afforded the capability of doing it all at once. Again, you want to, again, this affords you the capability of saving system resources and saving time. So yeah, that's practical application number 2. All right, so now on to practical application number 3. All right, so on to practical application number 3, I'm going to apply a technique called sidechaining. So for anyone who watches this channel, you guys would know that I'm a big fan of sidechaining, or it's just because it's a dynamic processing. A lot can be achieved with very little effort. So let's go ahead and get started here. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to, another cool thing is, it's like if you're in your channel view, you can swipe left and access previous pages. So your submixes are, so if I swipe all the way over to the left, you get to your submixes. You swipe all the way over to the right, you'll get to your, or if you push to the right, you'll get your original channels. So I'm going to do is I'm going to go back over here to my kick drum, and I'm going to click this power button. Well, actually, I'm going to click the insert button. I'm going to apply a dynamics processor. I'm going to use the Mother Ducker input. Now, another thing that you want to do is you want to make sure that all of your inserts are turned on. You see how the Mother Ducker is grayed out right now? Well, if I turn this on, then it activates. If I go back, that power button goes away. So, but the Mother Ducker, notice how it says 2 bus 1. And I know what you're asking. The kick drum is already routed to a bus, so to speak, that being submix number 1. So why am I routing it to another bus? Well, the answer to that question is that the Mother Ducker insert, or the Mother Ducker in and of itself, which is the inherent sidechain compressor for the MPC, it has its own inherent bus group. So there are 8 buses associated with the both with the mother ducker, 1 through 8. I'm just using number 1 right now. And it'll make more sense as I move along. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll over to my pad bus, and what I'm going to do is apply the mother ducker, not the mother ducker input, but the mother ducker in and of itself. That's our sidechain compressor. I'm going to click the edit button here. All right, so notice how at the bottom, on the bottom of the screen, it says from bus 1. Well, what's happening right now is that this compressor will only activate when the kick drum sounds off. The kick drum is acting as the trigger for the compressor. So for all intents and purposes, all of the parameters are the same. I like the fact that I'm on a dedicated ratio system and decibel / gain reduction system here. I have my let's see, I have my attack and release in milliseconds, in millisecond units, so that's pretty cool. All right, and yeah, let's just go ahead and get started. For right now, I'm going to shut this off. I'm just going to play this through. Now I'm going to turn it on. Now, notice over here, there's a meter that says, that's spelled REDUC, reduction. At the moment, you can hear a slight reduction in the gain. Sorry, at the moment, you can hear a slight reduction in the gain when the kick drum sounds off. I'm going to make some edits to these parameters, and well, you'll see what happens. Quick attack, so the attack down, quick release. All right, guys, so as far as this third technique is concerned, it affords you the capability of dynamic gain reduction. So for some forms of electronic music, it can, or any form of music, or any genre of music for that matter, using a sidechain compression can help breathe life. It can actually give you space for certain elements in your mix. It can also create like in this case, it creates kind of a pumping effect, just kind of breathes life into the mix. I would highly recommend experimenting with it. Use your ears. These settings are not the gospel by no means. So yeah, that is the sidechain application. All right, guys, so let's summarize our 3 techniques. Number 1, bus compression. Bus compression helps to manage, sustain the dynamics of a particular group in your mix. In this case, the percussions for me. I want to make sure that my kick drum stayed punchy. I want to make sure that the hi-hats had some element of semblance, all the while maintaining the dynamics or the levels of each element of that particular group. Practical application number 2, EQing. In this case, what I did was I used a high-pass filter to cut my lows, and I used a parametric EQ to attenuate the mids to some extent. Basically what it does is it just helps you to carve out space in your mix, all the while addressing all of the elements pertaining to that particular submix, as opposed to editing them one by one. And then ultimately number 3, dynamic gain reduction, for pumping effects, carving out space for other elements in the mix, contingent upon the trigger of another. So these techniques accomplish 2 things. Number 1, they save time And number 2, they save system resources. This is the reason why I like submixes. So all of that being said, I'm hoping that answered the question. And if you have any further questions, please let me know. All right, guys, so that wraps up the Submix practical applications video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you guys have any questions about anything that I've covered or any further questions about anything I've covered, feel free to leave them in the comments and I will get to those as quickly as I can. All right, until next time, guys, you take care of yourselves. All right.